So I just wanted to start out by saying thank you to my supervisor Sherry for emailing me her answers to these questions. Due to some personal reasons, she was not able to join me on the call this week, but I'm not going to get into what she's going through, so we'll just go ahead and get started. The first question I asked Sherry was how many EEG patients does she see on a typical day? And she responded with, we are responsible for performing EEGs on both outpatients and inpatients. On a typical day, we see 3 outpatients in the morning at 9, 10, and 11 a.m. And the number of inpatients that we do really just depends on the day, but on a typical day, we see 4 to 6 patients altogether, including the outpatients in the morning. The second question that I asked Sherry was, what does the process of doing an EEG look like? So this was a pretty lengthy response. So she says the process is the same for both outpatients and inpatients. The only time the process changes is when we do a continuous EEG. In that case, the only difference is that we use a gauze wrap to ensure that the electrodes stay on the patient's head, as continuous EEGs are typically 24 hours or more. In a routine EEG, she says we place 23 electrodes on the patient's head, 2 on their face right under their eyes, and 2 EKG leads on the chest. We use a conductive paste to stick the electrodes onto their scalp, as well as a skin prep to make sure that we will get a good reading. Then once the electrode is placed, we use a cotton ball to make them stay, and this process takes about 20 minutes. Once all of the wires are on, we begin the test, and that runs for 20 minutes. There are 2 types of stimulation that occurs during the test. First is a breathing exercise where the patient hyperventilates for 3 minutes, and another is a strobe light that comes on 8 times for 10 seconds each burst. Lastly, once the test is over, we simply take off all of the electrodes and then use a hot rag to get off as much of the paste as we can. The patient is typically in the room with us for 45 minutes, which gives us about 15 minutes to prep for the next patient. The next question I asked was, do you prefer single-use electrodes or reusable? She says that she loves the convenience of the single-use electrodes. Cleaning the reusables is such a pain, and it's so much easier to just take them out, all out of the head box and replace them each time rather than taking the time to take all of the paste off, take all of the skin prep off and the cotton balls and disinfect, sanitize, all of that. It's quite the process. Next question I asked was, why do you think the electrodes that we use are one use only, and why aren't the reusables used more often? She says it's probably more sanitary than using reusables and definitely more convenient to use one use only electrodes. I know when I use the reusables, I'm cleaning them for at least 10 minutes, which then makes my day less efficient. If there was a better, quicker way to clean the reusables, I would 100% use those more often. The next question I asked was, why do you think single-use electrodes are not currently recycled? And she said she would assume that it's very expensive to recycle medical equipment of any kind. The next question was, what do you think might happen if hospitals do not start making equipment and tools recyclable? She says, with the world we live in and the climate change era and the generations of people who are all environmentally conscious, I can see landfills being full of mostly hospital and factory waste because people are starting to become more eco-friendly. If we as hospitals can eliminate some of that waste, it can help make the planet a healthier place to live. My next question was, do you believe that it could be beneficial in the long run to have a recycling program for our electrodes? She says, in the long run, the environment would definitely thank us. Like she said before, since people are growing to become more environmentally friendly and conscious of their decisions, it would make our hospitals more attractive to people needing EEGs, since we would have a system that is environmentally friendly. Next question was, if you could ultimately make this decision, would you be on board with the idea of a recycling program? She says she would absolutely be on board. It seems like a great idea from what she's heard. It would be a long process to try to implement it, and it would be very expensive, and those are her 2 main concerns. The next question was it fair to say that you would be interested in discussing this further? She says, absolutely. I think that this could be a great idea to actually pitch to management. And lastly, what is something that you think I can look further into for our next meeting? She says, I would say maybe looking into different local recycling plants to see what all they can recycle already. If they already have a program for items like these, it would save a huge amount of money for not having to create a program as well. So this wraps up our first sales call. Once again, I just want to thank Sherry for being able to step aside for about 10 minutes to answer my questions via email despite her situation, and she will definitely be able to physically join us for our next meeting.